Hello everyone, welcome to the part 4 of AWS Bedrock Zero to Hero series. So in our last session, we talked about AWS Bedrock Agent and how an agent has action groups which are like Lambda functions associated to it, as well as knowledge bases from where it can work like a agentic RAG agent, and it can use these two sources as its tools to get the overarching goal or objective that the user has provided. It also has access to this prompt templates, which are the best practices followed and created prompts that we can also evaluate in AWS Bedrock. We saw a simple AI agent, which is just a task oriented kind of implementation where with a simple task like, hey, write a letter or send an email or referring the knowledge base of like a financial report, tell me what are the opportunities for a company to save money or something like that, right? So these are simple task agent. We also saw about multi agents where there is a supervisor agent, as we call it, and that agent can collaborate with other single task agents. So this supervisor agent will have a goal to achieve. It will plan as to how it should call its sub agents, as or in AWS Bedrock we call them collaborators, to get the job done. Now moving to the next topic in AWS Bedrock is AWS Bedrock Flows, right? So far we have seen that in Bedrock there are like prompts, knowledge bases, agents, which are the generative AI elements, right? They have LLMs associated with it, right? However, in the real world, right, you usually want your generative AI elements along with some predictable workflows, right? So today, when you say about automation, it is mostly a workflow driven system, right? Where there are various paths, like there are conditionals, there are iteration loops, there are like aggregators in your logic, which kind of collect information from different sources, do the judgment and take an action, right? So AWS Bedrock is a no-code drag and drop sort of an automation where you can take your existing workflows, figure out where generative AI can be used there, or just start with generative AI workflows, or as we call it, LLM augmented workflows, and get these both generative AI elements as well as this deterministic logic driven elements of a workflow, right? So in one line, I would say AWS Bedrock helps you to create a multi-step orchestration to develop generative AI workflows. And to take it one step further, you can now trigger these workflows, trigger these AWS Bedrock flows from your existing automations, right? So if your existing automation had a step to personalize emails for a customer, you can have that section of creating an email, checking who is the user, then making all the branching logic, iterations through different types, iterations through the emails that you create, and then finally sending. You can make it as one workflow and can just trigger it from your main workflow. Now if you see at this image carefully, as for today's demonstration, I have a suicide prevention assistant flow, right? So the other day while I was reading online, I saw an article which said that a lot of times due to work stress, people commit suicide, right? And a lot of studies also showed that these people have expressed their frustration, their stresses, or they have given subtle hints about if they are feeling like the life has no meaning or they've given up on life, right? So the goal of this particular data flow is to show you a POC of how an AWS Bedrock flow can serve as a friend or as an empathizing friend who can help you take a step back and think about your rant or whatever you're putting online. It can also identify if you are suicidal or non-suicidal based on the training data that LLM has, and then based on the conditions, it takes different paths, right? So if in flowchart I have to show, it's like a user enters a frustration text, right? There are two approaches. One is a conditional node which identifies if a person is suicidal or non-suicidal. Just to show in this workflow different components of AWS Bedrock Flows, I am also triggering a AWS Bedrock agent, which essentially checks the intent of the user's frustration text, and it figures out if a user is suicidal. This Bedrock agent only works if a user is suicidal, else it will do nothing, right? So if so coming back to our conditional, in this conditional step, we will check if a user's rant is, or a user's comments, or a user's conversation is suicidal or non-suicidal. If it's suicidal, we will create a calming response and helpful content based on what user is asking, so that he takes a step back, he or she takes a step back and thinks about what he or she has been writing. Then we also submit that analysis and store it in a S3 bucket for analysis later, so that if we have to reach this user offline, we can do it or engage the right authorities, right? Here we will be using AWS Bedrock's S3 storage functionality, right? And once it is stored, then we will take the response that LLM generated along with the response that AWS Bedrock might give into the collector node, and there is another, and then with use of another prompt here, we will create a final answer that we will give to the user. Now if the content is non-suicidal, we will tell the user that, hey, looks like you are stressed. So we have a stress directory, right? Stress related information stored in a PDF in our knowledge base. We will query our knowledge base, we will get that particular information to as like practical tool to reduce stress. Then we will give it into a Lambda function, right? This is to show how your AWS Bedrock Flows can use Lambda as one of the elements, right? So what a Lambda function will do, it will take whatever relieving stress handling documents are provided. It will then create a response for you. It will take the response for you, which is created by LLMs here, and then it will send the email to the user. Along with it will also show you the response in the chat window. So if you have got this flow, let's go to the demonstration. So if you see here in my flows, I have a flow created, right? So let's first see in the flow builder how the flow looks like. Let me go on the left side. So if you see here, there are various nodes here, right? As I said, there are certain logic nodes in your workflow which are fixed, right? They are not, there's nothing generative about them. A conditional, a collector, a iterator. Then there's an orchestrator. Orchestrator is the part where you have to make a decision, you have to come up with a plan. It's a non-deterministic, where you have prompts, right? Prompts and agents, because agents only work as per the prompts that are written in them. So they are not deterministic as such. Then you have code, which is a deterministic part, which is the Lambda function that I just explained we are going to use. Along with that, we also have access to various data sources, and this is flow output, as in it will show it in the chat window. Now if you realize, all these individual parts are already AWS Bedrock functions, right? Agents are a Bedrock function, prompts are a Bedrock function, Lambda function is an AWS function but not really a Bedrock function. Knowledge bases are Bedrock functions. Your S3 is AWS function. What job this data flow do is get all these functions together to create an end-to-end generative AI kind of workflow. And for someone who doesn't want to code or who doesn't know how to code, this is a very good way to get started, right? Think of this like NetN workflow that we saw last time, right? It was just bunch of nodes. We connect them into a logical flow. We write in prompts so that they process the information or create new information, right? So here, based on the previous workflow, we get an input. After input, we process it in our first prompt here. You have to select a model. You can also apply guardrails to this. Since it's a POC, I haven't put those in. You can see that I have put a role here that you're a suicide prevention assistant. Here I tell it to divide my content into two categories, NS, which is non-suicidal, and S, which is suicidal, right? Then I have a condition node here. If you see, the flow is defined by connecting one node to another node, right? So the output of prompts is connected to input of the condition node. Here I have two conditions, one is NS and second is S. So let's first see the suicidal condition flow. So if a condition is suicidal, if the LLM identifies that the user is suicidal, it will go to prompt 2. Now in prompt 2, what I have said is, you are an empathetic and helpful assistant. Based on user input, generate a response to calm user down and divert him from taking extreme steps, correct? This prompt will take in the input. Now the input is coming from whatever the user had provided in at the start. So notice this, that in workflow you are connecting a node to another node. However, the inputs can come from anywhere, right? Because the condition is only checking for a condition from your previous node, right? So you will take what user has provided once you have identified it and provide it as an input to your prompt. Once a prompt processes it, generates a response, it will go back and it will go and store it in S3 bucket, right? So the output of that prompt, which would be a calming message, will be stored as a text blob in your S3. Along with that, we will also give that output to a prompt in here, to which I will get to in a second, right? This prompt is sort of a collector prompt, right? It is collecting a responses from your workflow of where your knowledge base are involved, your LLMs are involved. And remember, I said we will also trigger a separate agent when a user input is received, right? So this a good use case for this is to just make sure be double sure about, okay, what my workflow in the top half, like the first branching is done, is really correct. So if both my agent and workflow identify certain thing as suicidal, I'm really sure that I'm targeting the right user base. But for the POC, I just wanted to show how to integrate agents, right? So that's why I put an agent node here. So you give that input to your agent. In agent, I have created this agent in our Bedrock. So let me show you that. So if you go in this agents folder here, you will see suicide quick action. Here, as we have already seen, we go into the agent builder. I have given it a simple instruction. We can have a detailed instruction here as well. So I have said your task is to generate next steps. If you think the input is suicidal, just plan, no direct intervention, right? This is a secured communication user and the suicide help hotline. Suggest some resources, make up data for this particular POC, right? And the output should be in this particular format that I have specified here. Since this is POC, I have just kept it simple, but we can make this really verbose so that it actually gives a lot of information and handles what should be communicated to user in a detailed way. So once this agent gives you an output, both these outputs from your prompt at the top where your LLM is generating a response, and here where your agent is generating response, we kind of collect this response in this prompt. So to see what it's doing, in prompt file it's saying accept 2 inputs from these agent nodes, right? And and create a coherent report from them, right? So once you get these inputs, it will go further and it will combine them and it will give you a final output. Let me show you both the flows. I have already created their executions. You can create executions which you can refer later to see the flows. So let's go to my new flow. So let's see a suicidal execution example. Here if you see, this was my prompt, this was my input, sorry. Like, I'm so stressed at work, sometimes I feel like, would it be really matter to my office people if I am suddenly no more tomorrow, right? So this is clearly a suicidal kind of a text. So if you see, this came as an output, which is a calming response, like your path forward, a message of hope and support. So it did everything, right? It took the inputs from the LLM generated output, as well as it's getting me inputs from what agents provided it. How can you my bad to see the details, click the you can click the details on the home page, and then here you can see a detailed trace of what was happening. So as you can see here, you had a flow input. After that input, it went to that prompt 1, which determines if it's a suicidal or non-suicidal, where now if you see, the input is the rant that I provided, right? So it figured out, okay, this looks like a S, which is suicidal content. Then it went further to my agents node. Agent node was given that information, and agent gave an output based on it, identified it was suicidal, and that's the reason why it gave an output, right? Else it wouldn't have. So agent node was not agent node was triggered. Then it went to the conditional node, right? So as you can see, after this is identified as suicidal or non-suicidal, we trigger two kind of inputs. One is the agents node and one is the conditional node. Here the condition was matched for S, and based on that condition, it went to a prompt 2 here. In the prompt 2, we have told it to create a calming response, right? So it again took the input what user has provided, and then it generated a output, right? That output first was stored in S3. So if you see here the document, this is an input to S3, and S3 it will be stored as S in your S3 bucket, right? This is the output. It will be stored in S3 bucket resume Ashwin as S, and along with that, it will also show it also has a prompt 5 here, right? And this is like your the bottom prompt, which was collecting the inputs from your agents node, as well as which was connected inputs from your prompt node, right? Which essentially we saw here, which was generating a calm response, which was then saved in S3. So it aggregated both of them and finally gave you a unified output format, which was then displayed on your flow output node, which is what we are seeing here on the left hand side, right? So this is the complete data flow. Coming back to our regular flows, let's now see an example of a non-suicidal flow. So I come here, I go to non-suicidal execution, right? In here, as you can see, I hate my coworkers, it causes me irritation, I end up fighting a lot, and at the home. So here I am not really showing the saying that it's a non-stressful or something like that. In here I wanted to just show what my lambda function is giving as an output. That's because if you see here, my lambda function is the one which is actually processing and sending the output. Lambda function is sending an email, and I have set the return value to indicate who the email is sent to and what was the status. But you get the idea about the flow. So now if you go to the details, you would see a flow. So prompt input flow, this is what user inputted. Prompt 1 determining if prompt 1 is determining if it's S or NS, right? And it also triggered the agent node, right? Now see here, this conditional node determined it an NS. However, the agent was only told to act if it's an S, right? So it never went ahead and did anything. It just stopped there. So it goes to the condition node. Then we have a prompt here. It accepts the user input of how it is, and then it went to the knowledge base, and it crafted a query. In this prompt 3, I have told it to craft a query based on user input to get some relevant information from your knowledge base. So it went here, got the crafted this query, sent to the database, the knowledge base, and it got information back from it, right? So based on search results, here are several effective strategies. Now prompt will take that and send all that information to, along with it will, this prompt will collate all that retrieval results, create a coherent text out of it, and send it to Lambda function. Lambda function will then send it to the email that I have specified, which is my email here, right? And after that it will output the results to flow output node, saying that okay, this is what I did. And now if you have to really check, you can go to email, please read it, right? Based on search results, here are effective strategies for managing workplace stress, and this is the text blob that my LLM came up with based on what I had in my knowledge base. So yeah, these two are kind of the flows that I wanted you to show you, and to also demonstrate all these elements that we have as nodes, right? And how you can create a flow out of them. Yeah, thank you. I hope this was useful. I'm open for questions.